Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another of the Celebrate All Things Older series. This is class number 2. I already feel like I've been doing this for a while, just because I've gotten so excited about these wines and I've been planning them for so long. Been really excited about these wines for this whole month, just the whole idea of celebrating things that are getting older. So today's class is all about my old favorites. And I know that sounds like a weird thing because I'm always telling people to try new wines, try new wines. It's like, don't ever try the same wine twice if you can help it. You don't have to be monogamous with your wine. And I do believe that. But it's so wonderful to know that there's always something that you can go back to that you're going to love. Every vintage just kind of grabs your heart, and it's just a really beautiful thing to have those wines in your life. So yes, always try new things, and always keep your options open, and don't be monogamous with your wine. But if you have those things that you love, celebrate that. Really excited for this class. If y'all are tuned in live, please tell me who you are, where you're coming from in the chat room. Chris Nelson and the whole gang, the Portsmouth tribe. I love it. Chris, Bonnie, Charlie, and Wendy. Great to see y'all. I know, Wendy, you've got a May birthday too. What day is, well, actually, that's probably not something you should share on the internet. Never mind. Happy birthday this month. So, Tawana, so excited that you're tuned in live with us. We've missed you last week for sure. And Chris Nelson and the gang, y'all haven't been able to tune in live for a while too. So I look forward to seeing all of your comments in the chat room. If you're watching this and it's later and you're not live, I'd love to know. Send me a text message or an email, and or shoot a comment on the actual video. I'd love to know if you're watching this at a later date. And you don't have your glasses or contacts, excuse the typos. Oh, I hear you there. I wouldn't even be able to find my actual wine glass without my glasses. So totally get that. Oh my gosh, birthday is today. Happy birthday. That is so fabulous. Glad you're celebrating with us. Brendan, Peter, y'all are going to have to help me out with the pronunciation of your last name. Biznoska is what I'm going to go for. Tell me if I'm totally butchering that. I apologize, but I'm going to give it a shot. Hi, Kieran, Rob, coming in from California. Great to see y'all and have you here as always. Do tell us what you're opening up tonight. Is it another Cabernet or maybe a Malbec, possibly, since it's one of your favorites? I'm curious. So really excited to have you all here. If you've already, and Tony Simonetta, great to see you as well. I'm excited to have everyone here. This whole month, we're doing this Celebrate Things Getting Older because I'm getting older this month. It's my birthday month. Normally don't make a big deal of birthdays, and I'm definitely not one to celebrate a birthday month. But this last year has just taught me that use every opportunity you can to celebrate, and that's what we're doing here today. And it was good marketing. So I love finding new ways to figure out what classes and what themes to do. By the way, if you have any ideas for summer classes, please let me know. I'm looking at June and July schedule now with a blank mind. So help me out. Another Cabernet, awesome. Do tell us what's your favorite Cabernet out there, and have you visited the winery of whatever you are drinking since you live out in that state? So close enough. Okay, Brenda, I'm just going to call you Brenda and Peter. I'll skip the last name. Brenda B, maybe we'll call it. So, hey, Angela, you made it too. Fabulous. All right, we got a good day on here. Some mom and some pop send their regards. They are not tuned in live. So you're seeing my office here, all the wines behind the computer. And so that's what's in the background. We've got lots of maps this way as well, so it'll be fun. It's hard to transport all of these very large, heavy framed maps to my parents' house every Thursday for this class. So excited to have you all here. So we're going to do 4 wines. And to preface this, these exact wines haven't been like my favorites for like 10 years or anything like that. But the style of wine, or maybe that producer, but a different vintage or a different cuvee or something like that, has been something that I continually fall in love with every time I try their wines, and they just always fit the category. So we'll explain it all as we go through. But we're gonna start off with a Lambrusco. So if this is the first Lambrusco you've had that hasn't been like your grandma's Riunite in the jug wine kind of thing, in the huge jug wine, like gallon jugs of Riunite. It's red, it is slightly sparkling and very sweet, and just like Kool-Aid wine. That's what most of us think of as Lambrusco. That's what I thought of for years when I was younger as Lambrusco. And I didn't know that there was a lot of higher end Lambrusco out there. By higher end, I don't mean that expensive. I mean, this bottle is, $17. So it's definitely not that expensive, but certainly higher end than the $5 gallon wine. So we're gonna be opening this up, and I figured I'd go ahead and open up on camera to show y'all some tips and tricks for safe opening of sparkling wines. If you haven't done this before, I remember the first time I was in a restaurant as a waitress at like 18 years old, probably illegally opening wine for a customer, but back in the day, no one cared as much about that stuff. So I had no idea what was going on, so I just took the cage off, and then the cork was there, and I tried to use my wine key on it, and of course it exploded, and the wine key went over, fell onto a table, broke a wine glass there. Luckily, it was a table that people had left, so it didn't hurt anyone and didn't stain anything. But I wish someone had told me before I went to the table how to open up wine properly. So it's one of the first things I ever teach my staff when I'm hiring staff when I was working in restaurants, and now I'm going to teach it to all of you all. So you have a cork here. You have the cage. The cage keeps the cork on. It is necessary to have this cage because there's a lot of pressure in this bottle. Sparkling wine has higher pressure. It has dissolved carbon dioxide, which is always trying to escape and become explosive. So we want to make sure that that explosion doesn't hurt anyone, pop out an eye. I've had lots of bad experience. My first experience as a restaurant was what the story I just told you, but as a person was I was 7 and it popped off into my mouth and I almost drowned in champagne literally on Christmas Eve one year. So let's figure out how to do this safely. So I always use a towel over top of it, and I kind of hold the towel like so. I hold the towel and the neck of the bottle. That way, if it does actually explode, it keeps the cork from hitting the ceiling, popping off a light, or breaking anything. So I always put the towel so that this little cap is pulled off to the side. You're going to untwist it. It's exactly 6 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 will get it loose. Then I just jiggle this cage so it kind of loosens away from the actual cork itself. Then you're going to hold the bottle at 45-degree angle. Don't worry about where the label is facing. In restaurant service, the most important thing is safety, not where the label is facing for sparkling wines. And 45-degree angle is going to kind of slow the rate of explosion if it does happen. And so it just prevents you losing wine, because we don't want to lose wine. We don't want to lose the bubbles. You're going to grip the bottom of the actual bottle and twist the bottom. Meanwhile, my hand is holding the cork steady. So I'm not twisting the cork. This hand is staying still, and I'm twisting the bottom at 45-degree angle. If you didn't open your wine like this, and that's totally fine, but now you have something to practice over the summer with all the sparkling wine drinking. So I'm twisting it just slightly. The cork is now starting to try to explode out. I'm trying to keep the pressure on it. It will come out, but we don't want to hear a huge pop. So if you heard that, it was just like a slight hissing sound. There's some people who say it should sound like a puppy fart. Other people who said that it should sound like a woman sighing in bed. However you want to say it, or hissing like a snake, however you want to say it, it should not make a large pop. The larger the pop you hear, the more of the carbon dioxide is escaping and not staying dissolved in the liquid, which is what we want, because that's what creates the bubbles. So that's it. If someone does it for you at the restaurant, not like that, please tell them to watch this video so that they know how to do it. So I'm going to pour myself a big old glass of this, and I want to tell you why this is one of my go-tos and one of my all-time favorites that I keep going back to. One, I love sparkling wine. I used to be a huge champagne not addict, but nerd. I just nerded out over champagne. I knew every vineyard name and all the laws and producers. It was just like my goal in life to just drink nothing but really delicious champagne. That was it. I developed this weird allergy that is pretty severe. My throat closes up with a lot of sparkling wines, and we can't really tell what it is. I mean, it has something to do with the yeast, but I'm not really sure. And so there's a lot of sparkling wines that I can't drink, and most of them are higher end champagnes, like from the area of Champagne, France. What I generally know I can drink is this wine. So it's one of my sparkling wines that I enjoy drinking when I want that glass of sparkling wine and I don't want to have a severe allergic reaction. So if you haven't already, go ahead and pour yourself a glass of that and sip on that while I talk about Lambrusco and why everyone needs to be drinking more Lambrusco in their life. So this right here is the map of Italy, as you can see. So the map of Italy from north to south is a lot of different land, different geography, different cultures, different languages, different foods, and a lot of different grape varieties. In fact, there's about 1,500 indigenous grape varieties in Italy alone. So think of a grape variety like Chardonnay is a grape variety. Lambrusco is actually a grape variety. There's several different types, including some red Lambrusco grapes and some white Lambrusco grapes, different mutations, genetic mutations of the Lambrusco variety. But the Lambrusco is the name of the grape and it's the name of the style of wine. So it is in this area right here of Emilia Romagna, and that is the area that is most famous for Parmesan cheese, actually. So think about those huge warehouses with those huge blocks of Parmesan cheese that are aging for years. That is where the true Parmesan cheese comes from, Emilia Romagna. Also where all of your Lambrusco comes from. So you cannot make Lambrusco unless it's from this area with these grapes, but it can be made in a whole range of styles. So yes, it can be made red and very, very sweet or dry. This is slightly, not sweet, but it has a slight amount of residual sugar to it. So it is very pleasant and approachable. This is not made according to Champagne method. So the Champagne method or the méthode traditionnelle, or the just traditional method, all of those are the same term to describe how true champagne is made in the area of Champagne, France. So back in the day, they just basically couldn't figure out what was going on in their wine and why it was fizzy. And when it wasn't supposed to be, they wanted to make regular still wine. They weren't trying to make this fizzy wine, and they couldn't figure out why. This is back in the 11, 12, 1300s. A long time ago, before they understand the science of fermentation. They finally figured it out over, the course of 400 years. But while they're figuring it out, they first of all tried to get rid of the bubbles. And then they realized, we kind of like got the corner of the market. We cornered the market. You understand the phrase, whatever that English phrase is. We have the exclusive ability. We're the only people in the world making this fizzy wine right now. And all of a sudden people are starting to ask for it. Wasn't very high quality juice, and so they left a lot of sugar in the wine or even added sugar to it afterwards just to kind of cover up some of the flaws of the actual wine. But it was slightly sparkling, pretty darn sweet. I mean, we're talking like what we think of as sweet wine. This is like next level stuff. The Tsars of Russia really enjoyed it. And it was a way for them to basically drink sugar. And sugar is a very expensive commodity, but when you actually just drink it in your wine, it's cheaper because it's using the natural sugars of the grape. So they finally figure out how to control the fermentation and to encourage and provide the environment to make the best sparkling wines and allow those bubbles to exist in the wine. And what they do is they make still wine, so regular wine, in these big vats. Then they blend it into whatever cuvee. Cuvee is just French word for blend. They blend that into the style of wine that they're trying to make. They'll put that still blend into a bottle like this, and then they'll add a little bit of yeast and a little bit of sugar as a mixture to it. Then they'll seal it with what kind of is like a beer cap, a very old-fashioned beer cap on top. And then that starts a secondary fermentation process in the bottle. Well, as we know now that they didn't know before they figured this out, is that the fermentation 101 yeast eats the sugars of the grape, and what the byproduct is carbon dioxide, the bubbles, and alcohol, the thing that gets us drunk. There's some other processes going on, but that's just kind of the fundamentals. So when the liquid is now going through a secondary fermentation process in the bottle, there's nowhere for that carbon dioxide to escape. When it's in a big vat, it bubbles up and evaporates. But when it's trapped in the bottle, it becomes trapped in the liquid, and the carbon dioxide is literally dissolved into the liquid. So that's what creates the sparkling wine. And afterwards, when the fermentation process is done, they might age it for a period of time on the lees or that yeast that's left over. Then they're going to finally get rid of the lees and the yeast through an expulsion process. We'll do a sparkling wine class later to go through all of this a little bit more in depth. But since it's not that, we'll just skim through it. So they get rid of the yeast and they'll put a real cork on with that cage. So it took about 700 years for them to figure this all out, and then they finally did, and that is why they're very protective of their term champagne. So that's why technically you can't call any sparkling wine champagne unless it is from the area of Champagne, France, made according to that method, the traditional method or the champagne method, secondary fermentation process in the bottle, and according to all of their other rules and restrictions. Everyone else is going to call it something else. Cava in Spain, Prosecco is also made in Italy. But Lambrusco is the style and the name of the grape, but it uses a different method than the champagne method. It uses what we call the Charmat method. That's with a CH. Type it in the chat room. Charmat method. And that is where they do the big tanks of still wine, and they literally just inject carbon dioxide into the wine. So you have a little bit lower alcohol content because you're not going through a secondary fermentation process. So you don't get that extra byproduct of that secondary fermentation process of the extra alcohol. And the bubbles are a lot softer. So if you are someone that doesn't like big cannonballs exploding in your mouth of traditional champagne or cavas because they're just too aggressive, sometimes those wines will make your eyes water, your nose gets all tingly because of the carbon dioxide. If that is not your thing, then you might really enjoy Charmat method sparkling wines, which Lambrusco and Prosecco are both made according to that way. So I love the nose on this. It's a little nutty, but it's like apricot tarts, little pastries with the apricot in it. A little bit of that yeasty, brioche kind of note to it. A little bit apricot pear. Fruit forward, not overly complex, delightfully simple. Let's taste. Super soft bubbles, just kind of a light tingling on the palate. Coat your palate. Is not overly acidic either, so this is a sparkling wine you don't have to necessarily pair with food. It's just a really, really lovely, enjoyable sparkling wine to kind of serve as an aperitif. So that's how they would traditionally serve this. You have aperitif hour in Italy, also throughout Italy, about 4 o'clock. So after you've sobered up from your lunchtime wine buzz, then starts the aperitif hour, and you could have like a cocktail like a Campari Spritz, or you can have a sparkling wine. It's very classic, and this would be perfect for that 4 o'clock sipper. So if you thought that it's weird to drink before 5, don't think that. The Italians do it, and they've got like a lot of things figured out. So I fully support the 4 o'clock sparkling wine aperitif hour, and this would be in my glass all the time if I waited till 4. So let's see. Great question. Is Lambrusco ever made into a still wine? It is quite possible. The Italians do everything. I have never had one, seen of one, or heard of one, but it is totally, totally possible. Very great question. I will have to do some more digging on this. So what are y'all experiencing in this wine? Do you like the wine? Is this something you would drink more of in your life if you had it? Is this totally different style of sparkling wine than you're used to? And is this anyone's first Lambrusco? I know I threw a lot of questions out there, so choose the one that you would like to answer. Oh, it's got this nice minerality to it, but nothing's over the top. Yeah, super lovely. Um, let's see. Wine number one, loving this one. Getting baked pears on the nose with added white peach and honey on the palate. I love the honey call. Yeah, it's like this honeycomb call, like the crunchier part of the honey. I like that. Um, Italians do it, so we should do it. 4 p.m. drinking. Yes, yes, yes. I love it. First non-red Lambrusco, Chris says. Awesome. That's super exciting. So Bonnie, I think you've had this wine before, if I remember correctly. But I know you're particular about the sparkling wines that you like or don't, or sometimes the full sparklings are too much. So is this something that you like? And if anyone likes the classic big bubbles, is this kind of disappointing because it's not big enough and explosive enough for you? Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking forward to just drinking these wines for the rest of the night. So I think I've been featuring Lini Lambrusco since I was in my restaurant days. We did it on Italian flights. I do it on sparkling flights. We make cocktails with it. We put a little bit of Campari in it, make a Campari spritz. We would do some Aperol too. It's perfect for brunch that way if you want a softer style of mimosa. I have done this in private events, and I don't think I've ever served at a private event where people didn't really, really enjoy the wines. And so every time I was just looking for that sparkling wine that was a crowd pleaser and so many people would enjoy, I kept going back to it. So since vinoculture started, I think I have featured this in about 7 different classes, about 8 different private events, and it's been featured in a specialty 6-pack so many times. So I apologize if you get tired of seeing this wine, but I just think everyone should drink more Lambrusco. So that's my mission in life. Brenda says, we like the smaller bubbles. Awesome. I do too, especially when I'm not drinking it with food. I love sparkling wines with food. Some people just think sparkling wines are for cheersing, for toasting, for celebrations. They're really great food wines, especially anything salty. So I think fried chicken is a really amazing pairing that all of us wine nerds and somms really enjoy. It's kind of that high-low pairing, really, really high-end champagne with fried chicken. So good. Works really good with kettle potato chips if you just are looking for scrummaging through your pantry to find something. Sushi and sparkling wine is one of my favorite pairings. Yeah, chocolate covered strawberries does not work with sparkling wine. Whoever invented that as the sexy thing to have in the hotel didn't know anything about wine pairings. Chocolate and sparkling wine is kind of a weird pairing. So, and even strawberries, it's going to make the strawberries seem really tart and not very sweet at all. So I don't know why that's a thing, but it is. And so just next time, think sushi or fried chicken or potato chips for your bubbles pairings. So you like a crisper sparkling. Interesting. I think your tastes have quite changed, Bonnie, since we first started tasting together many moons ago. So that's awesome that that your palate has changed a lot. So Joanna says, I think bigger bubbles would distract from the flavors in this particular wine. Yeah, because it's not overly complex, right? The flavors that are there are delightfully balanced, but it's not overly complex. So bigger bubbles kind of would overpower the kind of delicate nature of those flavors. So Chris and Charlie like it. Wendy, not your favorite, and Bonnie prefers something else. So I like the mixed bag there. So Kira says, we would love to try this. Rob prefers smaller, less intense bubbles. Sounds right up your alley. Absolutely. Check it out. Total Wines generally don't have any Lambruscos that are in this style, but any specialty wine shop might be able to have something. This is Lini 910, but if you can't find this, just look for any Lambrusco that is in a smaller bottle is generally going to be closer to this style, even if it is slightly sweeter. Let's see. Are the smaller bubbles better or worse for mimosas? Great question. It all depends on what you want. To me, the juice is already going to dissolve some of the bubbles. So I like bigger bubbles for mimosas because I want the bubbles. And so if you pour the bubbles on this wine, you're going to lose some of that. So that's why I was thinking a lighter mimosa not meaning orange juice, but that a little bit of Aperol or a little bit of Campari. Those won't dull the actual bubbles at all, but give kind of that brunch cocktail vibe. So not an actual mimosa, because yeah, the any juice on top of this will just kind of flatten the wine. Great question. Chocolate and champagne combo, not great. Had sushi last night, awesome. If you have any, well, leftover sushi is not really a great thing, but next time, put this in the fridge, and next time you have sushi, have this. So, all right, we're going to go on to the next wine, and the next wine is from France. I'm going to switch out my maps while y'all pour out the next wine. We are drinking Champalou. I hope this isn't backwards when it's actually filmed. Tell me, y'all, if you can you read these labels, or is it backwards to you? On my screen, it's backwards, but I think on your screen it might be good. So this is Champalou. Champalou is the name of the producer. Les Fondeurs. I don't speak French, but I'm going to give it a try. Les Fondereaux is the actual name of this particular cuvee that they make. Kermit Lynch is the importer. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And Vouvray is the actual region, which is written actually on the side of the wine label, not on the front like most of their other classic ones. So good. I'm glad it's not backwards. Fabulous. I'm going to switch out my maps really quickly. Whew. All right, could see that going bad. I'm glad we were able to do that without me knocking over the whole shelf of wine bottles behind me. All right, so here's the map of France right here. So in this area is the west coast of France. This is the Loire Valley. So it follows the Loire River and the whole river tributary system. So not just the main Loire River, but all of the tributary rivers that feed into the Loire, which starts higher up in the mountains, kind of here, and then flows, becomes bigger, wider, and lazier as it gets further to the coast, and then it spills out into the Atlantic Ocean. So starting in the center part of France, and then moving in. So this is actually called Central Vineyard, or the central area, the central Center Loire, not because it's in the middle of the whole area, but because it is actually in the middle of France. So if you take the entire landmass of the Loire Valley river tributary systems, you're looking at covering over a third of the entire country of France. So massive river tributary systems, massive diversity in terms of the vineyards, in terms of the geography, in terms of the grapes that are grown, and everything else. So think Loire and think, how vast the East Coast is, just from Florida to New York City. You have this huge difference in terms of geography, in terms of people, in terms of everything. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a third of the country. And this is not a country. This is not something that, like, all throughout the Loire you have a very classic style of wine. Lots of different styles. So we are going to be in the Touraine district of Loire Valley. So that is right here. So that is the central part of the Loire Valley, but not called Central Loire. That's further east because it's in the center of France. The French just make it all confusing for us. So within Touraine covers this whole third of the actual Loire region. And the area of Vouvray is to the north of the river, further east. So right here, if you can see that from the map far away. So Vouvray is the actual region. And the wines are labeled by the region here, not by the grapes themselves. So Vouvray is the region. You're not actually going to see the grape name on here anywhere. You can look. Every now and then, more producers, especially like their entry tier wines, are labeling their wine bottles as the grape variety itself. But their higher end wines are generally labeled by the region. And it is frustrating, right? If you don't understand all the wine regions and which grape you're getting, it can be a little confusing when you see all these French labels. And you're like, well, so is the grape Vouvray? Is that like Viognier? It's, that was very confusing for me when I first started learning about French wines because I couldn't understand what it was because it was just labeled by the region. So basically, until I memorized all of the regions and the rules, I couldn't figure out what anything was. So you don't have to do that. Just know that Vouvray is delicious. You don't even have to remember what grape it is, but I will tell you, the grape is Chenin Blanc, and it is a fabulous grape. Probably one of my favorite white grapes for sure. And here's why I like Chenin Blanc so much. First of all, it has really bright acidity, but also ripeness of fruit as well. So naturally, the grape themselves, as the grapes ripen throughout the growing season, the sugars develop in the grape, and there's two different types of acids that are there in the grape that are there at the very beginning before the sugars start developing, before it ripens. That's malic acid and tartaric acid. Sorry. Citric acid, very small amounts, but about 90% of the acids in the grapes are malic acid and tartaric acid. Both of those are pretty high at the very beginning. As the grapes ripen, what it uses as an energy source are the malic acid compounds. So tartaric acid stays high, malic acid gets used as an energy source throughout the ripening process. So your total acidity, the feeling of if you ate the grape raw, very early in the growing season versus later, is not just a difference in sugar, no sugar to a lot of sugar, it's also the difference in acids. So higher acids, lower acids. But Chenin Blanc, for whatever reason, its genetics allow it to maintain a lot more of the acid levels even as the sugar levels ripen fully. So that gives it a brightness of texture while a richness all at the same time. Oftentimes I find that white wines are either bright or they're rich, but not both at the same time, and Chenin Blanc is. And I think that complexity, that kind of juxtaposition, that overachieving quality of Chenin Blanc is something that I love the most about it. It's usually got this like vibrant minerality to it, this like textural component. It's lovely on the nose. It's just got a lot going on. It can be incredibly complex and able to live a long time. So able to age long in the bottle. That's because the acids are still higher, and often there's a little bit of residual sugar left in the wine. So go ahead and pour yourself a glass. I like a bigger glass for Chenin Blanc, just mainly because it's so aromatic that I like it to open up a whole lot. This is a glass that I really enjoy for sparkling wines or rosés. It is not the classic flute, because the flute is geared towards making sure your bubbles are preserved. But you can't smell anything out of a flute, right? And I think that smelling a wine is most of not most, but a lot of the enjoyment part of a wine. So I like a bigger glass for white wines. For sparkling wines and rosés also, because I like to be able to smell it. There's one trick that you can do to make your bubbles last longer, and that's just to pour smaller amounts and drink it faster and just keep refilling it is the best way to make sure that every sip of wine, if it's sparkling, has that vibrant bubble structure. Note about glassware, sorry about the rabbit trail. So bigger glass for Chenin Blanc is what I prefer. Oh my word, there's so much going on in this wine. All right, I'm just gonna give y'all a minute, and I need a minute just to smell this wine. And please comment in the chat room what you're smelling in this wine. Champollion, Le Fondreux, Vouvray. And I'm waiting for someone to say something weird too. So if you think like, oh, what I smell is a little bit weird, I don't know if I should say that. Yes, you should say it. So Vouvray is the region. Chenin Blanc is the grape that is grown in Vouvray. So it has to be Chenin Blanc if you're going to call it Vouvray. There's actually 5% allowance of maximum 5% allowance of blending this grape called Orbi or Orbois. I'm not sure which way it is pronounced. Orbois. I have never had that grape before. I don't know what it adds. I'm very curious about this. So one of these days, I'm going to find someone who's making 100% Orbois or Orbi, and I'm going to see exactly what the people who are choosing to blend a couple percentage points of this grape in there, what it is. It could just be one of those grape varieties that the vines are kind of co-mingled. The historic vines are co-mingled throughout the vineyards, and so you have to allow it because they're all being picked at the same time. So that's possible. Let's see. Angela Shealy, this one's not for me. Too much minerals and funky smell. Yes, there is a lot going on in this wine too. Let's and have you tasted it too, Angela, or is this just on the smell? Because it is curious. This wine, as it will continue to change from the nose to the palate. So, Tawana says for the Vouvray, getting loads of baked apples, pineapple, honey, and chemical smell, but I just can't put my finger on it. It's just barely there. Yes, there is a chemical smell. We'll talk about it in just a little bit. Consensus from the P tribe. We like it. Your descriptions of bright and rich are perfect on the nose. Fruit forward. Tough to select a particular fruit. You had to dump it. Okay. I'm sorry, Angela. Let's see. Let's get the wine into our mouth, and let's figure out this a little bit more. So that funky smell is two things. There's a little bit of this like pool toy smell, this plasticky smell, and that's coming from if there's any slate in soils at all, and there's white grapes that are grown there, and those white grapes are very moldable, very malleable grapes, like Riesling is one of them. Chenin Blanc is also one of them. It's very expressive in terms of it changes so much based on the soils that it's grown in. Can give a little bit of that diesel fuel, plasticky, pool toy, new Barbie, tennis ball kind of vibe to it. So I am getting a little bit of that. And a lot of that I think is coming from the silex soils that are kind of unique to this area. Not as much silex here as in just to the outside of Vouvray. There's a region called Jasnières, and there's also a region called Savinière. And those two regions also grow Chenin Blanc exclusively, are heavy, heavy, heavy silex soils, and that's going to impart a lot more. Again, we don't understand why that is. It's not that the roots are literally absorbing these minerals and then expressing it in the grapevines. We don't understand really the science why grapes taste differently based on the soils, but part of it is just how they absorb nutrients and water and drainage and the pH balance of the soils, and all of that goes into it. But the heavy silex soils is just going to be a little bit more of this like flinty kind of intensity to it. But in Vouvray, you have a little bit more clay, limestone, gravel in here. The limestone is definitely prevalent in all the best vineyard sites, which Champollion definitely has them. So Champollion started in about 1980s as husband and wife team. Their names are Catherine and forget the husband's name because Catherine is kind of the like head honcho of it, and now joined by their daughter Céline. And they've been operating this just 20 hectare estate. So 20 hectares would be about like 47 acres, just under 50 acres total. And they only grow Chenin Blanc, and they make it in every style possible. So they make it in sparkling style, which is prevalent throughout the Vouvray area. They make it in sec style, that's SEC. SEC, sorry, not extra capitalization there. And that's just a still Chenin Blanc, but dry style. They make it in a demi-sec style, and that demi-sec would be like slightly off-dry, a little bit of sweetness to it. And they make it also in a Mulot style. And Mulot, spell this here. Mulot style has some botrytis in it. So we do have a little bit of botrytis in here too, and that is the funk that is a little bit off-putting to some. So let me talk to you about botrytis, otherwise known as the noble rot. I'll write that in here too, botrytis. So botrytis only happens in very unique circumstances. And so every vintage of the Les Fondeurs does not have botrytis, but this vintage does. And here is why. Botrytis forms under certain conditions of humidity. And so throughout the Loire Valley, you do have some humid pockets, but depending on the year, you might have more humidity or less, depending on the rain, sunlight hours, winds, storms, anything could kind of go into whether or not you're going to have any botrytis at all in your vineyards. So botrytis is literally this fungus that will grow around the grape cluster and basically turn it into like this shriveled, raisinated, rotten mess. And then they make wine out of that. And it tastes, this has a very small percentage of botrytis in it, but often dessert wines are made with botrytis. So if this reminds you of a dessert wine, but it's not as sweet and you can't figure out why, it's because of a little bit of that botrytis or noble rot. So obviously, the sugars and the acids are going to be very concentrated in your wine when the grapes are botryticized. Say that 5 times fast, because the rot, the fungus is literally shriveling up and sucking out the moisture. So your grapes are going to be more concentrated in the acids, the phenolics, the sugars, everything, because there's not as much water to water it down in the grapes. You're also getting some of this botrytis in the actual wine. So it's filtered off. You're not drinking fungus or anything like that. Don't worry. It's not rotten wine. But it does give this extra layer of complexity that not all Chenin Blancs have. But I have really enjoyed this. So Tawana, do tell me, you posted about this wine particularly a couple days ago on Facebook. Does this bottle taste the same to you as the last one? It's the same vintage, I know, that you posted. But Chenin Blancs can change so much, I think, just when you open it, what you're eating it with, and so on and so forth. So was this too funky for anyone else, or a good honey taste? I love that, Brenda. Yes, there's so much honey in Chenin Blanc, especially like really good Chenin Blanc, that I really enjoy that. Not necessarily like sweet. This wine does have a little bit of residual sugar in it. It's about 16 grams per liter. So if you think about a bottle of wine, this is 750 milliliters. So a liter is a little bit more than that, 250 milliliters more. And so for a bottle, you're looking at 75% of 16. Someone do the math for me. That's how many grams of sugar are in the entire bottle. So don't think like there's 16 grams of sugar in this one glass. That would be a very, very, very sweet wine. And Chris Elson, not funky at all to you. So Angela, I'm curious. I wonder if you have a corked bottle, if it was a little too funky. Because there is a little funk on this, but it shouldn't be to the point where I had just poured out. So I'm gonna I'll send another little sample your way sometime and see if you still don't like that, then this just isn't the wine for you. But it's possible that your wine was corked. Tell me, Angela, if the wine, if you don't mind going back to it, did it smell like cardboard at all, or was it just the diesel fuel kind of smell that you didn't like? If it smelled like cardboard or like moldy or like wet dog or, wet newspaper kind of thing, then that could be a problem with the cork itself. So, similar, but I'm getting a little bit more of the funk on this one, Tawana says. Not sure if it has to do with the amount of time it spent open. Yes, I think the more time that this particular wine spends open, the more that funk kind of softens up and you get a lot more of these like honeycomb textures, this pear, this quince note. And if you haven't ever tried quince, I actually went to the grocery store one time and just got some quince to see what it is. Because I only ever had the quince jam, and it's a brown kind of reddish color. And then I get quince and I'm like, oh my word, this is the same color as a regular pear. I'm so confused. Why is the jam always that round or bread color? And that's because they actually let it oxidize before they make it into jam or that spread. And so just like you cut an apple and eventually it turns brown on the outside, they're letting that happen purposely with quince before they make it into those preserves. So all right, get that new glass, Angela. Just curious, love doing the experiments. And yeah, you probably do want a new glass for that so it doesn't change. The was corked. And what corked means is this cork itself, well, not this particular one because this isn't real, but a real cork is porous. Literally the bark from an oak tree. They punch it down. They make corks out of the specific oak tree variety, and a lot of it is grown in Portugal. And it's porous inside. So there's this little tiny fungus that grows in these pores. I know we talk a lot about fungus here, but I've been really fascinated with fungus lately. So I think I'm going to get some books about fungus and learn a little bit more about it. But this type of fungus that grows in the trees, it's not happening in your corks, doesn't like any volatile polymers of specifically like chlorine, and it reacts to it and turns it into a new chemical basically that it's not allergic to, and that chemical is called TCA, or trichloroacetanol. And that chemical smells a lot like wet dog, or wet newspaper, like dank basement. And if you have an issue with that cork, it could be that once the corks were made, bleach was used to clean the winery or the bottling facility. This is way back in the day before they figured out what was causing all these issues. And the cork itself is literally now reacting with volatile bleach or chlorine compounds. And so that's that. So they stopped cleaning everything with bleach, and now they're only cleaning things with like citric acid usually. And that sterilizes everything without being an issue with the cork. But every now and then, corks just like, there is chlorine in the air, molecules in the air are evaporating throughout. So every now and then, it used to be about 1 in every 10 bottles was severely corked. And now it's a lot lower, about 1 in every 30. But every now and then you can just get it. So you get the funk again on the new glass, but just tell me, does it smell like basements, or does it smell like pool toys? Because one funk is a bad funk, like the wine is not supposed to smell like that, and the other is just you might not prefer this funk. So this is the Champollion Vouvray. I have featured this again. Their sec is mostly what I featured. This is one of two times I've ever gotten my hands on this particular cuvee. They use older vines on their site for this cuvee, the Le Fondru. They do a little bit of botrytis, and they leave a little bit of residual sugar on this. So it's just this more complex, more intense style of Chenin Blanc and those older vines. So this wine could have also gone for my class last week about older vines, and because technically it's over 30 years old or 35 years old. I don't know if y'all can hear this. I apologize, but I guess they're using a table saw in the apartment above me doing renovations. So I'm sorry if there's some weird background noises. So, all right. Does anybody really enjoy this wine? I hope it's not just me that thought that this is one of my go-tos and one of my favorites. There's just so much going on. It's one of those wines that I could just pour a glass and I could just sit with it for like an hour and just keep getting new things as the wine opens up. So if the bottle's not already gone, maybe go back to it at the end of the class and see how your perception has changed a little bit. Love the round texture. It's like very creamy, not buttery, but like got this like creamier texture. So Brenda, I'm glad you love it. Tawana, awesome. So Angela says not corked, okay? Just not when you like. Okay, well, I'm so sorry. That's the fun of doing these tastings though, and I appreciate you being honest with me and telling me you don't like it. If I serve everyone 4 bottles of wine and everyone likes all of them, I feel like I haven't done my job quite enough to expand horizons and palates. So thank you for being brave and trying it. I think we'll all be willing to drive down to the Outer Banks to drink the rest of your bottle. But it's also really great cooking wine. So don't pour it down the drain. Maybe cook with it. It'll be perfect. So, all right. Glad to Tawana that you always enjoy it when it finds your way back to your wine closet. I like that. For pairings, think almost more like you would pair a red wine with this. So it could go with duck breast, would be really amazing with this. It could go with a little bit heartier things because of that intense acids and that richer, rounder texture. It was also aged for 11 months on the lees, the yeast of it, to give it that roundness, that creaminess. So it has that going on. And it was barrel fermented too in these 500-liter barrels. So it's got a little bit of that oak content. So just a lot went into this wine. Tiny little production is this producer. Champellieu only produces 10,000 cases total amongst all their things, but the only grape they grow is Chenin Blanc. So I'd love to do maybe a class one time on just Champellieu and try all of their different styles side by side. But a lot of times when you can get the one, you can't get the others. And so I'd have to start like collecting the wines for a little bit to get everything. So, all right, let's go on to the reds now. Don't want to keep you all night. And we talked a lot about these two. Let's get into the reds. So I've already poured mine. You don't have to try these side by side. But all right, so now we need a Washington State map. All right, well, let me put my blinds down so you can, the glare, it's not bad. I'm back, I promise. Well, that didn't change too much, but we'll just work with it. So here's Washington State here. So you think Washington State and we think Seattle, and we think what kind of weather? Rainy weather. We just think dreary, rainy weather. I think of Fraser, and I think of the need to drink lots of sherry because I would be needing to drink all day, every day if it was that rainy all the time. So Seattle, right here. Then you have the Cascade Mountain range right here. And what happens is it creates a rain shadow effect. So all this rain that's coming from these cold waters that are then being kind of sucked in, warming, rising, cooling, condensing, raining, is happening to the west of these mountains. To the east of these mountains, they have like virtually only sunny days. On the east of the mountains, you have none of that rain that you get on the west. So for instance, in Seattle, you have about 85 inches of rain per year. That is a lot. And the eastern side of Washington, you have less than 8, sometimes less than 5, depending on the region itself. So you have desert climate over here and very, very cold, rainy style over here, which means that the wine is grown over here because we all know that vines, while the vine itself might really thrive in rainier, wetter conditions, the grapes themselves are not going to be very tasty. And that's because grapes need the character that only the struggle of the vine is going to help give. So you've heard me talk about that quite a lot. So on the eastern side, the desert side, you definitely get that struggle. The grapes are really struggling to not ripen because there's plenty of sun, but the vine itself is struggling to stay alive, which means that it thinks it might die. So it's going to put all this effort into creating these really, really, really incredible grapes to attract the birds and propagate the seed. So if there are, four numbers that make Washington State so unique, specifically the eastern side of Washington State. There is wine growing here. This is called the Puget Sound, and there is wine growing in here, but less than 10% of their total production, and then more similar to like upstate New York wines versus eastern Washington, which is kind of the perfect terroir for making virtually every grape. And here's why. 4 numbers, if you can remember these 4 numbers. The first thing, 17. So 17 average hours of sunlight per day during the growing season. So that means like during like late spring, early fall. So during the time that the vine is leafing, the buds are growing, the grapes themselves are growing and developing, during that time, an average of 17 hours of sunlight per day. That's more than 2 hours more sunlight than Napa has. And that's because the tilt of the Earth's axis, we're further north, so you get those longer days in the north during the summer season. So that helps the grapes ripen even more than they would in Napa Valley itself. Second thing that I want you to remember, 6. So on Red Mountain, which is where this Kiona Vineyards Lemberger is, there are only 6 inches of rainfall per year. Per year. Not per week, not per month, not per growing season, per year. So desert-like climate, the vines have to dig way, 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 way down deep to make sure that they have the access to water to be able to survive. So 17 hours of sunlight, 6 inches maximum of rainfall, and 50 is the next number. So 50 is the degree of temperature variation from day to night in the summer of Red Mountain. So the day it could be about 95 degrees, 80, 90 degrees on the hotter days, and it could go all the way down to 40 degrees at night. So that is important for the development of the grape itself and making sure that the grapes stay complex, because if it doesn't cool down at night and it just stays 90 like we have here in Virginia, it's 95 degrees during the day, it might cool down to a brisk 85 degrees at night. That is not a big temperature variation. You need the vine to shut down the ripening process at night so that those sugars don't continue to develop all night long, and then you get early ripening of the sugars, but none of the other flavors have fully ripened. And so when you pick the grapes, when you need to, because the sugars are already ripened, you don't get any of the other flavors that could develop if the grape itself had a longer ripening season. So when it chills down that much at night, it shuts down the ripening season. The grape kind of goes into like retention mode, like we need to retain our energy. We're not sure what's happening. And then when the sun comes out the next day, they're like, all right, we can ripen again. So that diurnal temperature variation, that's the technical name for that shift of 50 degrees, is really important, especially when you have desert-like climate and you have 17 hours of sunlight and you have hot temperatures during the growing season. So you have to have that shift, otherwise we're not going to make really amazing grapes. So 17 hours of sunlight, 6 inches of rain, 50-degree temperature variations. The last number is infinity is the number I was going for. And while it's not actually infinity, it is close to it in terms of the number of different soil types that are in the Columbia Valley. So Eastern Washington, you have the Columbia Valley, which is this huge expanse that covers almost all of Washington's wine regions, kind of like encompassed overall arching. Puget Sound, obviously not, and there's one other region, Rocky, somewhere over here. But Red Mountain is in the Columbia Valley, and in the Columbia Valley, you have almost every step you take is a new soil type, but great growing conditions, which means that almost any type of grape can grow here. So virtually every grape. And there's more soil types in Columbia Valley itself than the entire U.S. combined. So really fascinating, the geography and the terroir of Washington State that makes it so special. So Kiona Vineyards, this is a favorite bottle of mine that I've loved for, I think I discovered it about 6 or 7 years ago. And ever since then, every vintage, it's just so delicious. And it definitely is one of those wines that over delivers. So I often forget about it. When I discover it again, I'm like, why don't I drink this more? So Lemberger is the name of the grape. It is mostly grown in Austria, where it is called Blaufränkisch, actually. And Blaufränkisch in Austria, in a cooler climate, is made into a very different style. Almost like a Pinot Noir-esque wine is Blaufränkisch when it's made in that cooler climate. When it's grown in these warmer climates of Washington State with all this sunlight, it is a much more voluptuous and round red wine. So what are y'all smelling in this? And is this anyone's first Lemberger? Yes, it's the name of the cheese too, and that's because it's the name of the town that the cheese is made from that is associated with this grape. It's called Blaufränkisch in Austria because it translates to blue French, and so the grape originated in France, was brought to Austria, but really only grown in Austria now, except for a few producers who are brave enough to experiment with some other grape varieties. Okay, Great. So Kira, you cannot hear me. I'm sorry. But it looks like, I'm sorry, maybe I was just too far away. So, all right. Tell me if you have ever had a Blaufränkisch or Lemberger before, same grape, just different name. And have you ever had a red wine from Washington State, maybe? Or red wine from Red Mountain? Red Mountain is the highest elevation area throughout the Columbia Valley. Kiona has about, I'm going to say 40 acres, 50 acres. And throughout the 50 acres, maybe up closer to 60. Don't quote me on that. All of their wines are made from estate fruit. They do not buy fruit from anyone else. They manage their own vineyards and estate fruit, and they sell their fruit to other people. So other wineries, very expensive, prominent wineries buy their fruit. Up to 60 different wineries, I think they sell their wines to. So glad you can hear me now. Brenda says, first Lemberger. Awesome. Love trying new things. Wine number 3, getting a touch of Brett. She means Brettanomyces, a little bit of that more fungus. That's a little bit more of that, manure-esque or barnyardy kind of quality to it. I'm not getting that in mine, but it could be just because I poured my glasses about 2 hours ago, and I'm, maybe that just had more time to air out some, or not air out, but open up. A little bit ash, I like that. Ripe black cherries. A lot going on in this. First time that she can remember having this grape, Tawana says, several from the state, but don't recall one from specifically Red Mountain. Awesome. Smoky cherries. Yes, I love that call. There is this smoke quality to it. There's like a little bit of this like leather quality to it, like new purse leather. Like I spent way too much money on this purse kind of quality too. Just this explosion of fruit on the palate. I love that it's such dark fruit, but it's not a punch in the face. It is a little bit, I know it's got this like a little bit of this lively textural component. I think that's because they don't put too much oak on it, so it's not overpowering anything. So this is one of my favorites to do for people who, when people say they like red blends or something like that, they just generally mean, I'm going to translate here, that they mean that they want this like rounder style of wine, which I love those, but I need something else. I need some sort of verve. I need some sort of tension. This has that, but has a little bit of that brown fruit quality. And so this is my favorite like entry into more intense reds. Let's see, new wine for the P-Town crew. All right, so yes, Chris, who used to hate that Brettanomyces, now you like it, and you are a fan. Is anyone else getting that barnyard? I'm not in mine. I'm not getting it. I can smell other things. I promise I don't have COVID. I need to keep going back to this wine. The fruit to me is just like really kind of what takes over this wine. Just really lovely. I love that kind of flinty call on this, that smoky, flinty. And it's got these like cherry cordial notes to it as well. A little bit of chocolate, a little bit like cocoa powder, which all Washington State reds to me give a little bit of that cocoa powder quality to it. So I really enjoy that. So, all right, Angela, don't get barnyard, which is great. I was afraid all of the wines were gonna be too funky. Y'all know I like some funky wines. I was trying to get wines that were not over the top funky, but hopefully there's a big diversity of everything. So, right. All right, so maybe it's true that the Brett will blow off. Swirl that baby around a whole lot, and as you do, especially if you poured the Kiona, the Lemberger, into the same glass that had a little bit of that Vouvray left in it, maybe you've got some like reaction to the funkiness, the botrytis and the funkiness of the Vouvray with this wine. So that's quite a possibility because I've got separate glasses for all of mine just for ease of doing it on the videos. So just make sure that like the whole glass is kind of being coated with the wine if you are using the same glass as that Vouvray. And Angela would also explain why you don't get it because you had a new glass for the red. So give them some good swirls, do a puff of air into the glass, swirl. And so if there is kind of this weird reaction of this wine with a little bit of that Vouvray, then it will kind of fully like be pushed out. So, or try a new glass and do it that way. But it is possible. So I love this wine for when I just want a glass of red wine. I don't necessarily want to pair with food. I just want a glass of red wine and I need it to taste good all the time. And I need it to be something that I can drink on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday without thinking and without like breaking the budget to do. So Washington State is what I generally go to for red wines when I want that like New World fruit, but I don't want to pay Napa price tags. So if you're a Napa lover and you haven't really experimented much with Washington State reds, I highly encourage you to because they can be over the top delicious and at a fraction of the price of what you will pay for your Napa wines. So, all right, get back to me when you try that Kiona in a different glass, y'all. But I do want to, in the interest of time, talk now about the Rioja. So I'll start talking about it. You can either pour it now or wait till you finish your Lemberger. And see, Tuana says, update, got a new glass, still getting the bread on it. Okay, less powerful on the initial glass. So it's probably just that it blows off a little bit as it opens up. So Angela says, would be great everyday wine, great price point, still eat some barbecue. Yeah, definitely it will go well with food. Just doesn't necessarily demand it, but it will go well with food. So absolutely. And Carrie, you might be able to find this. I know that like Kiona is not one of the producers like some of these others that I featured that is really difficult to find. And that's why it's generally a go-to for me because I've been able to find it other places and other restaurants and wine bars will carry it. So I really enjoy being able to see those labels and know what they are. So check it out over there. Let me know if you can find it out that way. Whenever you're ready, we are going to talk now about Rioja, and I'll get the Spanish wine map out. But this is Bodegas Riojanas. So that's the producer right up here, Bodegas Riojanas. Monte-Real is the name of their Gran Reserva. So the one that has undergone extended oak aging and aging at the winery before it's released. It is from the region of Rioja. It is a 2011 vintage, which is down here at the bottom. And yes, it is their Gran Reserva. So that means that Gran Reservas have to be aged for a minimum of 5 years before release. 3 of which have to be in bottle, and then an extra 2, barrel, oak barrel. 3 of which minimum have to be in barrel, 2 of which are in the bottle itself before it's then released. So this wine spends that amount of time in the barrel, then it's aged at the winery for an extended period of time. And then they've released this wine actually in batches to the market. So if you were able to over the holidays, and then once again, I did a feature of their 1998 vintage, which is incredible because Gran Reserva is just aged for so long in such a delightful way. I did those two side by side. It was really awesome. Here's actually, you have a bottle right here. Here's a bottle of their 1998. So what they do, which I love that Rioja does this, is one of the only people in the entire world, one of the only wine regions in the entire world that does this. And they age the wine at the winery and then release it when they think it's ready to be consumed. Versus Bordeaux, let's say, making some of the most sought after wines in the entire world, but they want to make the money now. And so they release it basically as soon as it's got a bottle and a label, and not necessarily, it's usually aged, left in the bottle for about a year or so before release. But that one's not ready to drink for 10, 15 years. And then they just release it when as soon as it's in bottle. So it's up to you to age it. And if you don't have the space or the time or the patience to age it, and you want to taste it how it's meant to be tasted with that age on it, you're going to pay a lot of money for the age of that wine. So you're going to find any older Bordeaux's, you pay like double the price for 10 years age on it. So Rioja does it for us and then doesn't charge us for it, basically. So this 2011 vintage, I think it's $40 when you buy multiple bottles. It's just a killer value. I fell in love with Rioja as like my first love of Spanish wine. So I was very lucky. I worked at a cashier at a wine store, so I was able to taste some of the most really phenomenal, epic producers throughout Europe as like really amazing benchmarks for what French wine tastes like, Spanish wine tastes like. And so I didn't try this one back then, but ever since I discovered Bodegas Riojanas, I've really enjoyed their wines. Old winery, the winery itself the history dates back to like the 1700s. So a lot of history going back, passed down generations, and different people have taken it over. Anyways, still making an amazing wine in a very classic way. So old school Spanish style uses American oak because at the time the Spaniards were colonizing the Americas, so they had a cheaper access to American oak. Even though the French were closer, the French and the Spanish didn't get along really well at that time, and the French oak was way more expensive. So they were bringing American oak back and making oak barrels to age their wine in American oak. And so it's one of the few European countries that still to this day uses a lot of American oak instead of French oak, Hungarian, Slovenian, anything along the European line. Also, they age it in a little bit more of an oxidative style. So you get this like a little bit more nuttiness, a little bit more of this like caramelization that goes on with it, just as oxygen changes the wine during the winemaking process, and that's on purpose. Oxygen isn't necessarily great for wine because it ages it faster, right? It breaks it down faster. But when it's controlled and done purposefully, it's a very classic Rioja style tradition. So it's 100% Tempranillo. A lot of Rioja's producers will age their Tempranillos or blend their Tempranillos with Mazuelo or Graciano, if you want to say it in that way, or Graciano, Mazuelo. Some other grapes as well, but Tempranillo is the predominant grape, and they only make theirs 100% Tempranillo and only use 100% American oak and do a lot of aging on it and then release it in batches. So this wine hasn't been sitting on my wine shelf for 10 years, I promise you. It's been at the winery, and I literally just picked some up a couple months ago. So tell me what you're getting in this wine. Oh, this smells like Rioja to me. So let me get that Spanish wine map out. I have a lot of wine maps, if you can tell. So, all right. Of course, the glare is right on the area that I want to talk about. This is Rioja right here. So Rioja's in the northern part of Spain, so a little bit cooler climate. You also have a lot more mountains up here than you do throughout the plateaus right in the middle. So Rioja is one of the coolest climates for wine regions in all of Spain. It's also one of the highest elevation wine regions as well. So Rioja is broken up into 3 areas. This area here closest to the east is called Rioja Baja. Lower Rioja, it's further south, also just not as high of a quality. Rioja Alta, which is to the south actually, and Rioja Alavesa, which is to the north, the smallest region of all of them. So the areas that are growing the best Rioja in terms of the most age-worthy, the highest quality wines are going to be in Rioja Alta and Rioja Alavesa. So this particular one is Rioja Alta. Classic winery, amazing producer, and everything about what I love about Rioja. So, and I picked these specifically, not that they're my most recent favorites. I think recently I've been on this just huge Italian kick of everything Italian. But these were kind of benchmark wines for me and benchmark regions and styles for me in the development of my own palate. So it's really cool to kind of taste all of these side by side and like do a walk down memory lane of when I first tried Rioja and when I first fell in love with Washington State, when I first discovered that Vouvray was not the grape but the region. And so what I really loved was Chenin Blanc. So let's see. Kira says, we already talked about this. Definitely checking out that red, the Lemberger. Tawana, just want to sit and smell this wine, this Rioja. Yeah, there is so much going on. To me, Riojas and Tempranillos Tempranillo is a very aggressive grape, right? It's it ripens early. That's the name. Temprana is the Spanish name for early. Ripens early, so there is this complexity that's only found in Tempranillo with some of the best producers that are able to like lengthen the growing season. If you just let it ripen early and pick it early, you get, your classic, $10 and under Tempranillos, which delicious, but definitely not as complex and nuanced as this wine. And so when you can get a Tempranillo that just really over delivers that, Tempranillo's got higher acid, especially in Rioja because it's a cooler climate, pretty intense tannins, and it really enjoys oak. Not all grapes enjoy oak. Grenache, for one, does not really like to be aged in oak at all, but Tempranillo really, really does. So awesome. So you're getting that oxidative quality of not just the 10 years age on this wine, but also how it was made with that extra oxygen, because what it gives is that creme brulee style. That vanilla bean is coming from the oak itself. It's going to give those vanilla qualities. American oak often will also give this vibe of coconut and dill flavoring to wines, whether or not they're from Spain or the New World. If a wine is aged with a lot of American oak, you can get a lot of these like coconut and dill flavors in the wine. Vanilla is going to kind of be imparted by all oak, but I love that. I love those qualities. So Brenda says, getting less tannins than the last one. Yes, because as wine ages, it lowers its tannin levels or its tannic effect. Because even though this wine, when young, this wine has intense tannins that just kind of assault your palate. But what happens as wine ages, and it just happens over time, tannins are charged. They have an ionic charge. So they're repelling against each other. They don't like to link up, so they stay suspended. And it's this whole polymer that has this larger surface area then. And the more surface area it has, the more it's able to bind to what it likes to bind to, which is water. And so it will bind to literally the water molecules in your mouth, absorbing the water. So it's literally drying your mouth out. And thus it's really, really tannic. So younger red wines are going to be way more tannic because all of those tannins have more surface area to bind with more water molecules in your mouth and give that drying sensation, that cotton ball sensation. As tannins age over time, not necessarily with air or oxygen, but over time, those tannins start losing their charge, just like we lose our energy as we get older. And they might link up together now because they're like, all right, well, in my younger days, I didn't want to hang out with you. But now that I'm getting older, we'll link up. And so they start linking up, which means that overall, all these tannins have less surface area, so less ability to bind with the water molecules in your mouth. Sorry for the intense science experiment on this, but that's why older red wines are softer on the tannin sensations. Even though they have the same amount of tannins, it feels softer in our mouth. So, all right, good. I'm glad you love learning about the chemistry of wines, Brenda. It's one of my favorite things besides fungus. This summer, it's my goal to study more fungus. So y'all will be hearing a lot more about fungus. Black pepper call, great. See, P-Town Tribe, aroma, salinity. Yes, there is this like briny quality. Think like tapenade, olive tapenade. And oh, yes, absolutely. And that's why it pairs so well with all of these Spanish like Iberico ham and Spanish drunken olives and manchego cheese, all these things that have a little bit of a saltier component to it. Really, really amazing with this wine. A bit funky. Yeah, there is it's just me, it's this like leathery rustic quality of Rioja. Got some plums, yes, overripe plums specifically, Bonnie, go. Chris, dark ripe fruit and pepper, black pepper, love that. So classic Tempranillo, lots of cherry, lots of dark fruits like plums, cherries, currants, lots of pepper to it. Lots of leather and tobacco. I smell a lot of tobacco in here. Like not like someone smoking a cigarette and blowing it in my face, but like a cigar box, like a cigar humidor would smell. very, and this like campfire smoke. So all those things put together, I just really want to be sitting out in a campfire, passing around like a peace pipe, and sitting, in some with my leather jacket, and like the smell of all of those things going on. And then you get all the fruit too. Maybe they're charring on the campfire. So good. I'm glad this hour and a half long diatribe of fungus and chemistry is interesting. So thank y'all for hanging with me till the end. I need to taste this wine. Wow. That's why I love Rioja. This wine would not be super pleasant for me just to sit and drink. It needs food. I really want like braised meats with this, something to kind of grip onto it. It would also be like the best pairing with like a char-grilled burger if you want to do again that champagne and fried chicken, 10-year-old Rioja and a burger. I like the high-low pairings a lot of the times just because I'm not cooking really amazing food by myself. So I usually just drink these wines with whatever I'm throwing together in the kitchen. So I can see this wine easily aging for another 10 years. So don't be afraid to lay it down in your cellar. When I had to paint the weird picture, so that because my dad normally does that, and his comments, I think his comments would be like, "Oh, I'm riding on my motorcycle, and it's really hot, so you get a little sweaty, and get like the burning tires," and like I'm sure he'd go all motorcycle-esque on this one, on his description of the personality of this wine. All right, so is this the first 10-year-old Rioja that anyone has had, or just older Rioja that anyone has had? Hopefully this opens our minds up to how wines age, how they can age, and to not be afraid to buy that 10-year-old wine, especially when it's Rioja. It wasn't sitting on that wine shelf for 5, 7, 10, 15 years. So you can still actually find pretty easily the 2001, 2003 vintages of Faustino Gran Reserva Rioja in even your grocery stores or Total Wines. And Faustino, because they're a larger producer, they're able to be sold in some of these bigger chains, wine shops. Even Costco, I think, might sell Faustino. And Faustino and Muga, two larger producers. Those were my first two introductions into Rioja. Muga's younger stuff, because they don't age their stuff at the winery as much, and Faustino's older stuff. And what I loved trying the Faustino, their old wine. I think back in the day I was drinking the 1995. And I loved pairing it with flan, the Spanish dessert flan, that custard style. And I love that pairing of a sweeter dessert with this drier red wine. And it was the first thing that kind of gave me some aha moments of how much food does change the perception of what the wine tastes like. So challenge you to maybe try some older wine. Generally speaking, older wine with softer tannins are going to work better with that dessert wine pairings. Think about pairing a wine with a dessert every now and then. I stay away from chocolate just because chocolate has bitter notes in it, and so does wine. Bitter accentuates bitter flavor-wise, and so it's going to make the wine seem a little bit more bitter when you do that. But maybe do, if you do like a cheesecake, just a classic New York style cheesecake with no toppings on it, I think with this Rioja would be truly incredible if you just want to go a little out there with your pairing next time. So, all right, so Chris says, yes, first time trying an older Rioja. So does same thing with Brenda. That's awesome. And Tawana, wow, this is. Oh wait, sorry, no, you're talking about the picture of my dad would be talking about. This may be your oldest Tempranillo. Okay, awesome. I'm really excited then to be sharing some of my old favorites with you all, and hopefully make them some of your new favorites. And yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed this class. It was a lot of fun for me. Next week is the big actual birthday celebration where we talk about old wines. So next week we're going to be doing 4 wines. They're just like always, and they're all going to be at least 10 years old. We're going to be doing a 1995 California Cabernet. That'll be really fun. A 14-year-old Nebbiolo from Italy, which is the current release of that actually, and it's like, I mean, I smelled it, and not to give it away, but when I was deciding on the wine for this, I smelled this wine and I just started tearing up. It was just so beautiful. We're going to be doing a 10-year-old white Burgundy to show that white wines can age too. And I was stunned at this wine, especially like at not being a very expensive wine too. And another Italian, Southern Italian red wine also. It's a Negro Amaro blend from Puglia, the heel of the boot of Italy. So really excited to do that. It's definitely not a cheap class, but overall the wines are totally worth it. So I really look forward to seeing y'all there. Thank you, and I look forward to next week, hopefully, to see y'all there. Even if you don't have the wines, you're welcome to tune in. We'll be talking a lot more about the science of how wines age and what's happening in the bottle. So if you have any ideas, again, for June or July classes, please let me know. Text me, email me, please. I'm looking for some inspiration here. But I have a feeling if I just keep drinking all of these wines, I'll find some inspiration. So until I see you next week, enjoy drinking some old favorites and find some new ones. And cheers, y'all. Bye.